Since January 1st, 1996, concealed carry has been allowed in most, businesses and buildings in the state of Texas, and we have not seen an increase in violent crime. We've actually seen a, decrease in firearm homicides since 1996. So we've had concealed carry for over 20 years, and it has not been a problem in the state of Texas. And just for students who support campus carry, we see that this is merely an extension of a law that was already passed 20 years ago. And in terms of self-preservation and self-defense, students who support campus carry, we fully support the police force, both in UT and in Austin, and we believe that is their number one job, is to protect us as students and citizens and to keep us safe. But however, in order to keep ourselves safe, the only person who can keep yourself safe, your individual self safe 100% of the time is yourself.
To kind of, I guess, go off what Andrew was saying, so they mentioned the respecting of the police officers. One thing that I would like to mention that kind of helps the case here is the Texas Association of College and University Police Administrators actually came out opposed to this law, along with, of course, everyone knows Chancellor McRaven came out opposed against this law. And then, of course, on campus, student government represents the official voice of students, came out against the law, and then the faculty council also unanimously opposed campus carry in general. And I think the rationale behind that is because we do put the faith in our police force, and as you've seen by several faculty members' comments, they believe it limits the academic freedom that could take place in classrooms. In fact, if you saw the Texan article, we actually already have a professor emeritus who is leaving because of this law.
Our opponents will say that it's helpful and sometimes even necessary for women on campus to have a gun in order to protect themselves against sexual assault, and that just shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how sexual assault on campus how it happens. It's not someone jumping out of the bushes and grabbing you when you're on your way home from the library. It's off campus, or it's at a party, or it's at a place where guns are probably technically already allowed. So that's not helpful, and I think it's really important that a majority of the stakeholders on college campuses did not want this law. Chancellor McRaven, also former Chancellor Siguro, I think it's especially important that university police departments don't want this. It makes their job harder, and they've stated that in that split-second decision that university police departments have when there is an incidence of a shooter on campus, having to make the distinction between a bad actor and a well-intentioned citizen when both have a gun is almost impossible to make, and it makes it harder for them to do their job. And even in the tower shooting that we had almost 50 years ago, people have testified at the legislature and said on numerous occasions that incidences of crossfire during that situation from well-intentioned citizens trying to take out Charles Whitman made the situation worse.
We've heard time and time again that the argument is that students are too stressed, this is too much of a high-stress environment, so on and so on. And I think that goes along with Andrew's argument that he made earlier, is simply trusting students to be the adults that we are. And as concealed handgun carriers, we're allowed to take our handguns into the grocery store, into restaurants, quite literally right on campus. But we aren't trusted to be able to preserve that same right and carry out the same responsibilities simply because we walk into a campus classroom.
I feel that within a year or two, sometime after campus carry has gone into effect, and we have seen that campuses are no less safe than it was before, you'll see that myth that campuses are unsafe, and professors will likely no longer fear that they will be able to conduct a classroom of controversial material, because the students who will be carrying are over 21, they are adults, and they are expected to act like adults. The biggest issue that we see here is an issue of trust between the students and the professors, and the students and the students, that you cannot trust another student to have a heated discussion with you without the risk of someone attacking you. And if that fear is not there, then the fear of campus carry is eliminated.
The training requirements for getting a CHL are less than what it takes to become a manicurist in the state of Texas. It takes you longer to get your license to be a manicurist than it does to carry a weapon around the state of Texas, and they've been reduced in the past few years. So really it's an issue of people not being trained well enough to carry their weapons, and even people who are properly trained don't necessarily feel like in the instance of an active shooter they could intervene properly. We saw this in the situation in Oregon last week. There were multiple Army veterans who had CHLs who were on the premise of Umpqua Community College who stated explicitly in interviews after the shooting happened that they didn't feel like they could safely intervene in that situation. They did not feel like they could have helped out, that they felt like any attempt that they could make to disarm the shooter would have made the situation worse. So even people that are highly trained don't necessarily think that in those situations they could help, which I think takes away from the self-defense the self-defense argument of having concealed handguns on the campus.
Sure, and then to go off what Jordan was saying, there was actually a New York Times article, I can't remember exactly how long ago it was published, that was talking about the accuracy of the New York police force. I would encourage you to go take a look at that because police officers in New York City who are trained and handle their firearm on a daily basis and go through rigorous police training still are not 100% accurate. It's barely half actually. So if that shows that police forces across this country aren't that accurate, then how can we say that one course that people are required to take to get their CHL is going to make them any more accurate?
Those of us that support campus carry, we believe wholly that although you might be armed, you have a concealed weapon, it does not give you the right to go out and seek danger and to go out and find that threat. It is for immediate self-preservation. So these some of those Army veterans, they were in a completely different building. So by them going out and trying to neutralize this threat, they were not only putting themselves at risk, they were possibly putting the police officers who were going to intervene at risk and some of the other students in that situation. So that is what the CHL course teaches you, that you don't go out and seek danger. It is an immediate self-preservation.
The United States is an international joke when it comes to gun violence. As of October 1st, there were 45 school shootings in the United States. That's an absurd number. And after the shooting in Oregon, there was a headline in Germany that was, once again, the U.S. learns nothing, which sounds like an Onion headline, but it wasn't. And Australia had a headline that, the United States is too immature a country to have guns. They still haven't shed their Wild West mythology. So there's something wrong with the way that gun culture operates in the United States that no other industrialized nation in the world has even close to the number of gun deaths that we have in the United States. So if we're talking about how these tragedies can be prevented, clearly there's something wrong with the way that we have gun culture in this country, and it's totally different from any other industrialized nation.
I believe, and I think that most campus carry supporters believe, that the potential good and the potential fortunate outcomes that you could have from a CHL holder in a direct threat are better than the already verified outcomes of a situation where nobody has a weapon and all the students are either killed or fatally wounded. So while there is a variability and you might not know how a student will respond in that situation, we already know what happens in a situation where everybody in a classroom is disarmed or is not carrying. That most, if not all of them, are killed or fatally wounded.
During the tower shooting, there was a lot of crossfire, and there's a woman who testified at the legislature and has spoken out who was there, and she was pregnant during the time of the tower shooting, and she almost bled out from stray bullets from crossfire. And she bled out for longer because it took police longer to deal with the situation because of the amount of crossfire. And I think it's so important to note what Tanner said earlier, that university police administrators for university and college campuses have come out as opposing this legislation that passed. So these are the people who have the real training, who are really the ones that we should be able to count on to take care of these situations, and they have said that this makes their job harder. And that, to me, is the most convincing argument against campus carry.